All right, we're good. Awesome. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are on the Her Royal Roots YouTube channel. Look at this lovely sign behind us. Lauren made this sign. I want to say thank you because I know it's probably something you guys haven't, seen before if you're not on Patreon. And so we have a new setup here. And this is all so that you guys feel like you're at home and more comfortable here on this channel. So I want to thank you. I'll put the link to the art behind me in the description later. Today, we are going to continue our journey through 2 Samuel. I did not say 1 Samuel this week. It's like the first time ever. We're going to continue our journey through 2 Samuel, and we'll be looking at a few elements because our story, as we've been following it, is constantly developing. We're constantly developing in our narrative, learning about our culture and the context of our culture through the events that are happening between 1st and 2nd Samuel. And this week is no different than the weeks before, where we will be looking at King David and his conquests, along with the attitudes of the nations around him, the attitudes of the people within the kingdom, and how he is able to navigate and circumvent that system as the king who is being obedient to Yah. We're going to see something this week. And if you've read through 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, or Chronicles, then some of these elements that are going to be brought out, you're familiar with them because there is no character without flaws. As we've seen up until this point, David has walked before Yah. He's made some mistakes, but he's gotten right back on track. Well, this week is going to be no different. Last week, David showed kindness to Mephibosheth, and we looked at the comparison between us and our nation and the kindness that our king has shown us and will show us in the future. This week, we're going to look at the offense of the Ammonites, not Amorites, but the Ammonites. And we're going to look at how David seeks to show this king favor and kindness and what his response is, and then how the actions in this particular text are going to lead to a prelude, if you will, to next week's and the subsequent lessons on David. And we're going to see another, unfortunately, a character flaw, but it develops in 2 Samuel chapter 10. I'm going to jump into 2 Samuel chapter 11 or 12 today, very briefly, because this story is in direct correlation. It's told in the Chronicles of the Kings in, I believe, 1 Chronicles chapter 20, we get the full report of the battle in 2 Samuel chapter 10. So I want you guys to understand that that is one complete narrative, and that we're going to see how certain points of the 2 Samuel narrative are interjected in between there to give us an understanding of what's happening with King David. So that's what we're going to be today. That's what we'll be traveling through. And I want you guys to sit back, relax, and interact and enjoy the journey, because when we get together on Shabbat, especially going through the 2 Samuel series, we are opening and unearthing a plethora of different gems that are present in the text. And it is an awesome experience. So grab your Bible, get your notes, and let's go. All right, let's open up, as we do, to the shared screen so we can read the text together. All right, so we're in 2 Samuel chapter 10. And it says, and it came to pass after this, so there has to be a before this, after this, that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his stead. Then said David, I will show kindness unto Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. So before, in the previous chapter, we know that David showed kindness unto Mephibosheth. And we went through the Hebrew letters, Het, Samik, Dalet. Hesed is the Hebrew word. He showed kindness to him, and we saw that as meeting a need. We saw that word also as the idea of offering a place of peace or protection to turn into. And so in the same case, David is offering Hanun the opportunity for peace and protection as his father had. Now it's interesting because Nahash is the king of Ammon. And we don't really have an understanding from the text of what Nahash, his father, did for David. There is no direct correlation. And in the process of my studies, I realized two things. One, we have to look at who the children of Ammon are. The children of Ammon, or Ammon, are the sons of Lot, as well as the children of Moab. And so in scripture, they're actually, when they're spoke about from Yah or in the text, you see them as one people, because they have the same father. It's the same as any other lineage in scripture, but they are a kingdom that's kind of not necessarily divided, but there's like a northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So you have Ammon and Moab, and they dwell on that side of Jordan. And the Ammonites are cousins of Israel, but they did something kind of, their land had been designated to them by Yah. So the Israelites were not able to take their land because it falls under that same covenant land space as the land that was promised to our forefather Abraham. So when I was reading and researching, because I want to know what kindness did Nahash show to David, I'm not 100% settled on this. I know there are rabbinical writings and other things that may confirm this, but it's an interesting thing to think about based upon the word hesed, which is to provide a place to turn into, or a place of refuge, and what was done for David when he was on the run from Saul. Now we know that the king of Moab showed kindness unto David and allowed his family to stay there while he was figuring out what, as David said, what Yah is going to do for me, how Yah is going to work this all out. It's interesting, though, that in this place, it's mentioned that the king of Ammon died, who was Nahash, and David wanted to show his son the same kindness, or the place to turn into a refuge in his kingdom. It's kind of interesting, but because those areas are used synonymously in the text, the land of Moab, the land of Ammon, because of their inheritance, it is a possibility that King Nahash was the king that allowed David to turn in and turn his family into him during his run. Or he could not be, and it could be a different king where David's family also dwelled in a similar area. But I thought I'd bring that out because we don't know what exactly happened between David and King Nahash. But whatever it was important to David that he show kindness to Hanun, Nahash's son. All right. We learned something else about David's character. We've seen this over and over again, but David was not a hardened soldier. Like, he wasn't just like, it's all about war and everything is fighting and I'm the king. And that wasn't his mindset. That wasn't his heart. Even with all of the calamity, all of the things that happened around him, all of the suffering of having to run from Saul, when David was set at rest, when David was in his position, David didn't have this necessity to be this tyrant ruler, but he was a benevolent king, not only to those within his area, but also to those without. And he understands something about relationship and family and other things. So he's like, okay, Ammon, you guys did some stuff. We fought against each other quite a bit. You don't want to let us pass through your land. There's some interesting things that happen, but the kindness of one of your descendants has now, in the same way before, caused me to extend my hand. Something else interesting is we always have to get the story back into place. So something else interesting, Nahash, right, was also the king, if you guys don't remember from 1 Samuel, when he came to fight against him in Jabesh Gilead, said, You don't have anybody to fight for you? Okay, you can be my servants. But first, I'm going to pluck out one of your eyes. That's the same guy. So the same guy who was this tyrant had also turned in some way and offered and extended his hand out to David, possibly, if it was the same king of Moab. But if it wasn't, at some time he did extend his hand, and him and David forged some kind of relationship based upon a kindness. It's interesting how Yah deals with different nations and different people, even when there are offenses against his people because of his ultimate covenant. So David had a tender heart toward those who were suffering, even if it was a king, a young king potentially from another nation. And so David, he doesn't rejoice in the death of this king's father, but he sought to show him kindness as he had done with Mephibosheth. The Ammonite nation had terrorized Israel in the past, yet they had an action, like we talked about, that softened the heart of the king. Remember Nineveh. If you don't know anything about Nineveh, Nineveh was a tyrant nation to Israel. I had a picture, and I think I put it on my other device, unfortunately. But at the British Museum, there is a stele or like a relief, and it has the conquest of the king Shalmaneser II, who is historically believed to be the king or the ruler around the time of the restoration of Nineveh at the hand of Jonah. If you don't know who Jonah is the prophet that sent to Nineveh to prophesy. Nineveh, the nation who was killing Israel and had subdued them, took their treasure. I mean, it's a mess. And Yah tells Jonah to go over to this nation. On the stele, what you see is the king Yehu actually bowing down to Shalmaneser II. And Yah has pronounced judgment. But when the preacher comes, when the prophet comes and preaches to Nineveh, the Ninevites are able to repent. And the reason why Yah says he sent them is because there were like 120,000 people, I think 60,000 plus men and children, who did not know their right hand from their left. They didn't know right and wrong. They had not yet come in contact with the righteousness of Yah and his Torah, and he extended his hand, he extended his kindness at the words of his prophet for them to repent. And they do. They fast and they repent. But later, they become wicked again and they're destroyed by Yah. So judgment can be stayed by obedience and kindness and hesed, but future wickedness can also bring rebuke. So we're going to see something interesting about Hanun. His father starts off wicked, and somehow the kindness of that he showed David stays their judgment, and there's peace between these two nations. But the actions of his son are going to cause a spiral effect for their nation that we're going to bring all together today. So David, what does David do? Let's look at what he does. Let's go back to our thing. So, and David sent to comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father. So he sends comfort, sends whatever it is that he needs in that moment. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon. So David tells his servants, you're going over here. His servants like, okay, awesome. We're going to go. And they go. And they go to the children of Ammon. It's interesting, not that this is a part of the text, but David sends his servants, but David doesn't go. David doesn't go. In the Hebraic culture and the understanding, a servant, a messenger, a son is equivalent to that person going because they're going at the charge of somebody else. We're going to see an interesting parallel with that in the Brit Kadeshan in just a second. So David didn't just think about how Hanun must have felt, but he did something about it. So often we are sympathetic toward other people and their pain, but it rarely translates over into empathy. We don't do what we would want to have done for us if we were in that same situation. But see, David doesn't just think good thoughts and send positive energy in this king's time of despair or distress, but he seeks to meet the need that he perceives that the king needs in his loss. And we have to, when we look at that, we've all been in that situation where we don't feel like our presence is needed, or whatever we are seeking to do is needed. I know somebody else will fill it in. Other kings could have. I'm sure that Nahash, the previous king, and now his son Hanun had plenty of allies who would come and bring gifts, and they probably had their own ways of mourning and doing things in their culture. But to David, it was only right that he did something from him in that time. He went into this with a very, very pure intent. There's no ill intent. He didn't say he was doing it for a bad reason. And that must be noted. So this is what happens. The men are going, and it says, and the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanun, their master, said, thinkest thou that David honors your father, and that he has sent comforters unto you? Hath not David sent his servants unto you to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? Okay. And so he says, wherefore Hanun took David's servants, like took them, lach is a Hebrew word, and shaved off one half of their beards and cut their garments in the middle, even to their buttocks, and sent them away. And when they told it unto David, he sent to meet them, because the men were greatly ashamed. Starts off with a kindness, no ill intent, a man actually feeling something in his heart about this king's loss. And it ends in the men who go being greatly ashamed. Sadly, we've all been there. Hurt, wounded, angry, and surrounded by less than wise counsel, or even hating the world, and in the process, cursing those who are sent to bless us. Hanun is sitting as king, and his father is passed, and a ally seeks to send comfort and to him, and because of whatever space he was in, and because of the ignorance of those surrounding him, he does something so offensive that there's really no coming back from it. How often have we been in trouble, trial, mourning, and despair, and when Yah seeks to bring comfort, we reject it and further spiral ourselves into a place of darkness? It's exactly what he did. It's exactly what he did. Some people are so used to dysfunction that when function comes along, they don't know how to receive it. Somebody's doing something nice for me. Why would you do something nice for me? And the people around him are egging it on, and it causes a bigger problem. See, David didn't want anything from Hanun, and he had no ill intent. He was just being himself. I, unfortunately, have been on both sides. I've been on the side of rejecting the hand of those who extend in your dark times, and I've also been on the side of reaching out my hand and those things being perceived as ill intent. And I'm sure many of you have as well. And it is the worst feeling on both sides to say, yeah, why did you not come for me? And I was like, I sent for you. And then on the other side, being the person that extends with no, just seeing and saying, I know you don't know me, and I don't know you, but I see you. I'm seeing what you're going through. I see your humanity. Your humanity is triggered my humanity, and I want to do something. And a person say, well, why would you do that? You must have another motive. You must just, and I'm like, whoa, okay. Yeah, okay. This is that moment. To hurt and reject the kindness of others is can be to our detriment. See, it went past seeing a person in their trial, but he mobilized his empathy in his men. Do you think that David really seeks to honor your father because he has sent comforters for you? Me and my husband used to have these arguments very early on in our marriage, and probably from my own traumas and not knowing how to be in a relationship. I was young, a bunch of other things. And he would say one thing, and I would say, "So what you're saying is," and he would go, wait. I said what I said. But we have the tendency to always interpret what people do through our own traumas, through what people have done to us before, or through experiences that we've never had. People around you are also doing that same thing. So if they're traumatized, then they're going to interpret the intent of others through their trauma. And if everybody in the system is traumatized, then nobody can actually see what's happening with a clear perspective, which was these men are sent, and they're sent to bring comfort, period. All this trauma is filtering these actions. Even if, though, Hanun wanted to view David's actions as positive, the men around him also had negative in their heart. And so they wouldn't even allow the favor that the king of Israel was sending to be presented to him because they were already in his ear. Yah often can send people to bring you out of a pit. And because our lowness attracts other low frequency people, those people will push us back in and ward away the people that are trying to help us out. Be careful in your slump, in your distress, the voices of the people that you entertain in that process. Hanun doesn't. And he takes David's servants, shaves off half their beards, cuts out the middle of their garment, and then sent them back. David's men were sent as ambassadors. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this now, of the kingdom to show kindness to the king. In the same way, just kind of shifting gears a little bit so we can see this from multiple sides. In the same way, we, Israel as a people, have been sent as ambassadors for Yah's kingdom. And with all the negative things that we have experienced for our own disobedience at the hands of the nations around us, there must have been small seeds of kindness sown by enough people that Yah has not yet fully wiped out every single one of our enemies and brought this whole picture to culmination. So brought it all the way around. And so in a last bid, Yah does two things. Let me give you both in this parable. Yah does two things. He sends his servants, he sends his messengers, then he literally sends the visible image of his invisible self. I'm going to show you it. And when they're sent among the nations, and when we have been sent among the nations, we have been mistreated. The men, though, it's very interesting. These men, they didn't wage war. These are men, like bearded men. So they're not like, teenagers. They're bearded men who come, and they come on behalf of the king. And they allowed what happened to them. Tripped me out in the text. But they allowed what happened to them to happen. It doesn't say that they fought back. It doesn't say that they tore up the whole city. It says that he took them, cut off half their beard, cut out the middle of their garment. So the garment, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is a garment of service. So it's actually a garment that shows that you came on behalf of the king. it would have been the garb they wore when they were on official duty. So it wasn't like they came sneaky in peasant clothes or in street clothes. They came arrayed in a way that you would come before from a king before a king. And so it was this garment, like with the head cut out like a almost like a cloak, and it came across and it would hang down, and it came down, it would hang down the back, and I'm sure it probably tied around the middle with whatever they would have worn under it. And so what they do is they split it all the way down the front so that it comes apart, and all the way down the back so that their buttocks would have been bare, and also their front part. It was shameful. It was like to literally shame them. And then he cuts off their beard. The beard in the Hebrew is the word zakan, and it is literally the glory, if you will, of a man, because it shows not only his wisdom, especially when he becomes a gray beard, but it also shows it's a covering for the baldness of his face. Hebrew men are supposed to have a beard, and it was also a sign of dignity for a man to have a beard. It's very interesting because the first thing that happens in Western society, especially for Black men, so-called Black men, Hebrew men, is that they want to shave off their facial hair. And it's a part of their culture to shave off their facial hair, but it's a shame for us. So you shave it and you bald this man's face because it makes him look younger, like a boy. But it wasn't a thing in the Hebrew culture to want to look adolescent. When you got your beard, right, that was a sign of like, man, I'm finally like a man, and your father teaches you how to, edge it up or do whatever would have been customary. But it was that sign that this is now a man, and to now take away or snatch his manhood was a sign, a symbol of disdain. Mind you, they knew what they were doing because other cultures in that area also bearded their faces. If you go back and you look at the Assyrians, Babylonians, Ammonites, they wore beards. So it was a sign of disrespect. The sign of disrespect. So they don't tear up the city. He shaves off their beards, cuts their garments. They go away, and they went and waited outside of the city, and the king was called and told what happened. He tells them to wait till their beards grow back. An offense so bad. Well, most of you know how long it takes a beard to grow if you're a guy and you've been waiting for your little patches to fill in or whatever. It's not something that you don't want anybody misaligning, cutting, trimming, and messing up your beard. It's a whole thing. I get it. And so he tells him to wait. That meant that what would have been a short journey turned into a long stay away from their family and others because they didn't want to go back and be shamed. It was such a big deal that they would stay and let their beards grow back in before they would even return home. So this is a major offense. I know it may seem small in our culture because we lack certain things of honor and respect because of the disenfranchisement of slavery that has caused us to not really take some of these things serious. But this was very, very serious to these men. Okay. Let's go back to the text. We're going to look at, I gave you the two words. So to cut is the word karut. Karut is this idea to sever a relationship. So what he does symbolically is saying, hey, I know my father had a relationship with you, but I'm severing it. To cut is to literally, karut is to break covenant, he's rejecting the kindness. And he not only does it in the garments of the men, but he also does it in their beards. Not only am I breaking the covenant, or I don't want anything to do with you, but I'm also shaming. I'm doing it in a shameful way. We know these men didn't come as spies because they were in their royal garb. They came on mission for the king. If King David wanted to be sneaky, he could have sent them looking like the people of the land because I told you earlier, they're cousins. If they would just dressed in regular clothes and showed up coming in and out of a city, nobody would have even known if he was trying to look and see what he can take from them. But he doesn't do it in a way of stealth or hide. So they shouldn't have had anything to worry about. People don't want to look at why we are in captivity. But the same way that Hanun rejected the kindness of King David is the same way I'll bring it back to us. We looked at the other nations in the past, present, now us again. We rejected the king of the universe in the same way. Yahuwah sent his word in the flesh in order to restore us as a nation, to literally say, turn in. Let me open the door up. Let me bring you back into the fold. Restore us as a nation, and to be the price for our disobedience. See, when you leave Yah, you go into bondage or in service to sin and to the adversary. And so there is a redemption price necessary for redeeming us back. Yah says, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And we rejected it. So instead, while we sit and are angered by how Hanun has treated the servants of David, let us look at how we have rejected and treated the king of the universe. Let's look at this parable. In Matthew 21:33 through 46, it says, hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about and digged a winepress in it and built a tower and let it out. So he was like leasing it to husbandmen. And then he went off to a far country. And when the time of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen that they might receive the fruits of it. And the husbandman took his servants and beat one and killed another and stoned another. Again, he sent out other servants more than the first, and they did unto them likewise. But last of all, he sent unto them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and let us seize on us his inheritance. And they caught him and cast him out of the vineyard and slew him. And when the master therefore of the vineyard cometh, what will he do unto those husbandmen? They say unto him, he will miserably destroy those wicked men and will let out his vineyard unto other husbandmen, which shall render him the fruits of their seasons. Yahushua said unto them, did ye never read in the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. This is Yahuwah's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of Yah shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. And when the chief priests and the Pharisees had heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude because they took him for a prophet. You see how that just switched. So you have the parable. Parables are stories based upon the reality of the culture and the text. I don't know if you've ever thought about the king sending out servants and then returning abused, and saw it parallel to what happened in the text with David. See, when parables are told, they're not told as make-believe. It's something that people know had really happened, and you use these stories to relate to real life and present events. David sends out his servants, not saying he used that particular story, but this has happened in our history. It wasn't like he came up, like Yehoshua was making up things in his mind about, what was happening in the world. These are actually events. But it makes so much sense looking at us as a people, the nations that we've been sent into, and how we've been treated. Also, it makes sense of looking at how we have treated and rejected not only our prophets, not only our kings, but also our king who arrived in the flesh in order to lay out and to gather and receive what was rightfully Yah's. Okay. And so he talks about, and I thought it was interesting, that the kingdom of Yah should be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. Meaning, like, you had your own space to do it and bring forth, and you didn't do it. So it's going to be brought forth another way. And then the stone which the builders rejected will come and then retrieve it. And there will be no abusing of the same such. Let's look at Matthew 26. Let's get Matthew 26. In that same parable that was given, it talks about how the son, the heir, the one in the likeness of the king, comes and they recognize him. It's very interesting because I shamefully make this messianic plug. A lot of people are doing that same exact thing. It's not that you don't know of the reality of Messiah and Torah. It's not that you have never read something and not the completion thereof. It's not that you have not read the Messiah of the Brit Kadashah, but that you have chosen to stare it in the face and you have rejected it. You've said, no, it's not for me. And when we're looking through the text at things, for them to make sense, there has to be a complete narrative. History has not stopped. As long as there is the presence of Hebrews, as long as there is the presence of Israelites, as long as there is this captivity in this land and in the other places we have sent still in effect, then the history of this book is still in full effect. And to pull out places of history because you lack understanding on those places. You won't even get into what you think about who and what, but you lack understanding about the progression of history does us as a nation and our redemption a disservice. Not being able to locate place in scripture where you to validate what you don't understand is not the text's problem, it's your problem. To say you reject something and you've looked at it a couple times and read something that somebody said about it is not the book's problem, it's your problem. So we're going to look at Matthew 26, Mark 14, and we're going to look at the mishandling of the servants and as in this place specifically, the visible image of the invisible Yah, his heir, the one coming in the garments that shows you and in the way that shows you that he is who he says he is, and what the text says, and then why David's next reaction to what these men did is in complete alignment with what Yah is going to do, not only to Israel who rejects, but also to the nations and everyone else who rejects the heir. Okay, Matthew 26. We're going to look at the mistreatment of the one that was sent. All right, let's look right here. Matthew 26, verse 57. And they that had laid hold on Yehoshua led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him afar off unto the priest's palace and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false witness against Yehoshua to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. And the last came 2 false witnesses and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of Elohim and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Yehoshua held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living Elohim, cursing him by Yah, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the son of Elohim. He's like Hamashiach, the Ben Ha Yahuwah, Ben Ha Elohim. And Yahushua said unto him, thou hast said, you said, nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of Shamayim. We already did the thing on the cloud. This parallel is amazing. Verse 65. Then the high priest rent his clothes. So this tears his clothes. He's furious, saying, he hath spoken blasphemy. What furthermore need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? They answered and said, he is guilty of death. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy unto us, thou Hamashiach, who is he that smote thee? There's so many people hitting him. He said, tell us which one of us slapped you. Tell us which one of us hit you, since you know so much. Woo. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and a damsel came. So this is where Peter denies Hamashiach. We want to stop there. So servant comes, servant, and they abuse him. See it. They slap him. Same way that when the king sent his servants, they did something. Nothing happens right in that moment. You don't see him destroy them all. He's not fighting back. Just the same men who had their beards cut and the hind parts and the middle part of their garment slit, and they're being shamed. He's being shamed in that same way, and no king, no nothing yet, right? Mark chapter 14 goes on and gives us the same display where they literally rip out Yahushua's beard, and they spit and they beat him, and they beat him unrecognizable. It's interesting that the same way, we don't see it in this exact same way. They didn't beat them. But when you take off a man's beard, have you ever seen a man that you've always seen with a beard, and then you cut off his beard and you don't even know who he is? Very similar. Where the idea of them making them to be less than who they were before they came. And the same thing they did to Hamashiach. And just in case, as I said it before, you're still in the mindset that this New Testament comes up with all these things all on their own and they come out of nowhere, let's go ahead and turn to Tanakh. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 50 and see if the events in the New Testament are something that some guy named Macion, I believe as people would say, made up, or if they're directly in the biblical text. And I challenge you that if I read this and you've never connected these two things together, that you go back and read your whole Bible. Not that you shouldn't anyways. And make sure that before you ever reject anything in Scripture, that you have a proper understanding of where things parallel and motif in Scripture and how they can be strung together to give us the pictures that we see. It just came to my head, and I think I'll use this example. When we see things in Torah, first 5 books of the Bible, and they're repeated in the prophets or they're repeated in the writings, we don't ever, I have never, some of you probably have, maybe. You don't say, oh, well, somebody copied something before and that's how that happened. Jeremiah was not the writer. He's not the person that wrote the book. He just copied that from somewhere else and made up a whole story, and none of that stuff actually happened. What keeps us from doing that is because the prophets, their prophecies have come to pass. So we don't look at how they compare, how they prophesy, and uncover that which is in the past and then present it in the present as a fallacy. But it's interesting that we do that with the Brit Kadashah. So I'm going to challenge you that before you reject just the alignment of prophecies of Yehoshua, how about you look at his actual prophecies? Look at how the word has prophesied this present day, and then tell me if his words are still rejectable. Then I would add that. All right, let's turn to Isaiah chapter 50. Thus saith Yahuwah, Where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have ye sold yourselves. You did it to you. Wherefore, when I came, was there no man? When I called, was there none to answer? Is my hand shortened at all that I cannot redeem? Or have I no power to deliver? Behold, at my rebuke, I dry up the sea. I make the rivers a wilderness. Their fish stinketh because there is no water, and dieth for thirst. I clothe the heavens with blackness, and I make sackcloth their covering. Yahuwah hath given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary. He wakened morning by morning. He wakened my ear to hear as the learned. Yahuwah Elohim hath opened my ear, and I was not rebellious, neither turned away back. I have gave my back to the smiters, and my cheek to them that plucked off the hair. I hid not my face from shame and spitting, for Yahuwah will help me. Therefore shall I be confounded. Shall I not be confounded? Therefore have I set my face like a flint. And I know that I shall not be ashamed. He is near that justifieth me. Who will contend with me? Let us stand together. Who is mine adversary? Let him come near to me. Behold, Yahuwah Elohim will help me. Who is he that shall condemn me? Lo, they all shall wax old as a garment. The moth shall eat them up. Who is among you that fear Yahuwah, that obey the voice of his servant, that walketh in darkness and hath no light? Let him trust in the name of Yahuwah and stay upon his Elohim. Behold, all ye that kindle a fire, that compass yourselves about with sparks, walk in the light of your fire and in the sparks that ye have kindled. This shall ye have of mine hand. You shall lie down in sorrow. Last one, Psalm 2 and 12. This is the culmination of this portion, where we're looking at the comparison of the king sending a messenger to show kindness, to show to meet a need, and to allow us to turn in to his space of grace. We see the king of Ammon, who Hanun, reject that. And we looked at also, if you're just now jumping in, how we have also been the rejectors of Yah's kindness. So we'll sum this portion up here, and then we'll continue through with the rest of our text. Psalm chapter 2, verse 12 says, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and ye perish from the way. When his wrath is kindled but a little, blessed are they that put their trust in him." Let's go back to 2 Samuel and see what the king is going to do about what has been done to his servants. Verse 5, when they told it unto David, he sent to meet them, because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, "Tarry at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return." Wait a little bit for the shame to pass, and then come back. And when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, they stank. They did something. They were like, oh, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good at all, because we realize the wickedness of our ways. See what they do, though. They saw that they were repulsive to David. And so the children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and a king of Maachah, 1,000 men, and of Ishtov, 12,000 men. So they didn't say, oh man, sorry. They didn't come with repentance. They didn't come with shalem, which is to make restitution for their wrong. They came with, well, I guess we got to get ready to fight. And it's so indicative. We've seen it before in the text. So interesting how that is how the nations are going to be. They're going to know, as they already do, a lot of them, that they have done wrong to the servants of Yahuwah, his ambassadors, his children in their midst. And instead of repentance as a nation, as a people, especially in this land and others, they're going to band together, hire men, get great armies to fight. Like, all right, well, guess we're going to fight them then. When the people Ammon saw that they made themselves repulsive, they knew they did this. It wasn't like, oh, snap. No, they did it. And because they knew they did, they're like, when you send them back, it's going to be on. So what are we going to do? Let's get some men to fight. David didn't reject the Ammonites. The Ammonites rejected David. See, Yah hasn't just rejected the nations, but their actions and their continual disobedience is what causes them to be rejected. Yah has not rejected us as a people, but our actions against him and our continual unrepentance, our way of trying to wiggle around his word and around his Messiah has put us in a position where now he is acting based upon our actions. This is a common practice. This is not something new of them hiring people. In 1 Chronicles chapter 19, the Ammonites paid 1,000 talents to the Syrians to fight for them. So this wasn't something new. People paid mercenaries or banded together, like, I'm gonna give you money, come help me. So for hire. When David heard of it, what does he do? When David heard of this, he sent Joab and all the hosts of the mighty men. Now, so where the story kind of shifts. This is what I've been pondering as we lead into chapters 11 and 12. David is the captain of Yah's army. And the first thing David does is he sends men to go see the king. Okay, that's fine. Then he sends word to the men that are in Jericho. All right. And then battle's getting ready to start. And David sends Joab. So I stopped and I'm like, what is David doing? David is definitely a hands-on king. Up until this point, everything that happens, David's like right there. There's a few things that David wasn't present for. Obviously, the death of Joab's brother and Asahel, when they went out and they had this little secret by the river battle. But in this case, it's interesting because up until this point, David has gone out to battle, as we know it, with Israel. We don't really get what's happening or why, but there seems to be a shift, just a little bit. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, it tells us how to go out to battle and what that looks like. There's prayer, there's priests, there's words spoken to the men that go out to battle. There's encouragement. There is the looking at the troops and saying, if you planted a vineyard and you haven't eaten of it, go home. If you're scared, go home. If you have a wife and if you haven't fulfilled your duties in any way, go home, because we don't want to be caused to faint on this battle. And then the men are split up into groups by their captains, and then they go out to battle. Now, it could be assumed that all of these things did happen, but what we do know is that David sent and David didn't go. So he sends out Joab and all the host of the mighty men. Maybe David thought, Maybe I don't have to go. But the function of the king was to walk amongst the people, and the function of the king was to be the captain of Yah's army. The king is, in a sense, the visible image of Yah out on the battlefield. When the king is in obedience, they follow the orders of the king when they go out. Now, we know that at times when Saul had fallen into either depression or whatever, Saul had sent out people before him. He sent out David, actually. He sent out David to go fight amongst the Philistines. And Saul was going through something. So I'm in this space of like, David must be going through something. We don't know what it is. We know he's going through something because he doesn't go out, he sends out. He could have just been tired. I talked to Maury about this. He could have been tired, battle fatigue. But what we know from before is that Yah has caused rest all around him. So I don't know if battle fatigue would have been the first thing that came to my mind, although he could have been on some other assignment. I just want you to know, we don't know, but it is an oddity. It is an oddity that David doesn't go out. Okay. So Joab goes out, and the children of Ammon, verse 8, came out and put the battle in array at the entering in of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and Ishtob and Maachah were by themselves in the field. When Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him, before and behind, he chose all the choice men of Israel and put them in array against the Syrians. Okay. And the rest of the people he delivered into the hand of Abishai, his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. Most of the time, when a battle looks like it can't be won, like it looks too heavy for them, then you see kings retreat. You see men of captains and men of valiant men retreat because it's like the battle is too strong for me. Not so in this case. Joab says, even though we be surrounded on every side, right? He called them to good faith. In 2 Corinthians 4:7-9, we see that same thing as it's be encouraged. Though the enemy be on every side, don't fold. As a people, and as individuals specifically, sometimes we're surrounded all around by the enemy, and people will call us, and it can be because of whatever, life, trials, tribulations, they'll call on us to fold. And Joab has a very different approach to that. He doesn't. In verse 12, he says, be of good courage and let us play the men for our people. It means let us go up against them and fight for our people and for the cities of our El and Yahuwah do that which seemed him good, putting all the faith and the trust in Yah's hands. This is a great speech by Joab before the battle, and he makes a few good points. Be of good courage. Courage and strength are not feelings just based upon circumstance. It's always easy to be of good courage when things are good. But in the heat of battle, it's natural to be nervous. It's natural to be anxious. And he calms that by saying, be of good courage, but not of your own strength, but of that of Yah. And Ephesians 6:10 states that we can be strong in Yah in the power of his might. They knew they weren't going out in their own might. They were going out for an honorable reason. We have to choose courage. We have to choose strength because it's not something that comes naturally in times of despair. It's funny that David is not out here at this time, but this could have been the very thing David also needed to hear for whatever reason. We don't know. He tells them, let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our Elohim. See, when they go out to battle, it's not because of a personal vendetta, but something had been done in the actions of the king of Ammon that showed that, look, we are playing on the offense now. They're going to come up. They are going to once again fight against us. So the battle was set by the actions, but they knew that the battle was not just because the men's beards were cut off. Not that that wasn't enough reason to go up, but that the disdain filtered down into the people. Joab called them to remember what they had to lose if they didn't trust in Yah. If they lost this battle, they would lose both their people and their cities that had been set up. This is also interesting to me that David is not there, because the borders of the city are what have been established. Now, it could be that David was not there because the battle was an easy one, or the battle was not something he had to show up to. I'm just adding those things in there as conjecture. But the reality is, every battle is a battle that could lead to the loss of lives. Every battle should be handled with the same level of gentleness and respect for what battle is. And we have to think that same way every time we go into battle, small or big, whether it's the battle over our tongues and our attitudes, or the great battles over those things that could literally condemn us forever away from Yah. We have to go into them with the same mindset, because it is the missing and overlooking the small battles that leads to the failure in the large battles. So this battle was a battle bigger than themselves, and the army of the mighty men had to remember that. Also, they had to remember that when battle comes, they can't get weary. See, when you first go into battle, you don't know how long a battle is going to be. I am sometimes the queen of this. Like, you say something, and it's like you say it and you don't intend for it to turn into something, and then you're talking about something for 6 months. It's like, oh my gosh, like I wish I would have just shut up. And what I really was trying to get across was not really that important. Sometimes the battle of the tongue can be that way. And oftentimes our life battles can be that way. Sometimes the very, very simple disdain and humiliation caused by somebody else can lead to a long unraveling of things that causes a trickle effect and triggers that causes us to have to deal with things. And so we can't just think of the initial battle as a battle, but also the continued battle to arrive back at shalom is also a battle. I've been in that position. I know a lot of you know, some don't know, but when people come against you, and when they come against you and reject you for whatever reason, and they cause discontent and shame, it causes a trickle effect, which it takes a long time to recover self back from. And so when men go out to battle, especially physical battle, there are hearts and minds that also go out to battle. And when those men come back, they have to recover for a long time. So battle is not something that has gone into lightly, not amongst our nation, and it definitely shouldn't be amongst the nation around us, even though we've seen differently. But the minds and hearts of men are broken and hurt by the death of their friends and people on the battlefield. And so we have to be careful, not only of how we process our battles, but how we choose to go into them as well, having an end game of how to come out on the other side whole. And for those people who start battles, you have to think of all the casualties. You may think you are shaming one, but you could be sending a whole army of people into hurt, danger, and a long time of recovery because of very, very stupid actions. Okay. When we go into battle, us as a people, us as a nation, us as individuals, we have to realize that what we have to lose is greater than the enemy that stands before us. If you are in battle right now, you have to know that you are fighting for more than just yourself in this present moment. When we fight, when we war, when we pray, when we resist the enemy, we're doing one of two things. We are condemning our future or setting up for later what Yah has already, well, I guess we're setting up to receive what Yah has already stored for us if we overcome. See, oftentimes we think about just the battle, but we don't think about the other side of it. When we fail, then it causes us to have to continue to battle. See, the in between phase of battle is the same. You can resist and then be built back up, or you can fall, have to repent, and still be built back up. The middle phase is the same on either side. So when we go into battle, we have to realize that being afraid of the enemy and succumbing to him is not going to help us. In battle, as a nation, we are dependent on one another. So each of our actions, each of our fighting, each of our persevering through lays the groundwork and paves the way for the future encouragement of others. See, sometimes we go through things and they don't have really anything to do with just us. Sometimes we go through things so we can be an encouragement to those who are coming after us, so that we can say, you know what, I know this is tough right now. And I know this is something that maybe you may not feel like you can overcome, but this is where Yah has been for me. This is what Yah has done for me in the same exact thing. And I'm going to walk with you through it. And yes, it's going to be rough. And yes, there are going to be, tears and bloodshed. And it's going to be a lot. But I'm also saying, and as you process and go through this, I'm going to process with you because I've been on the battlefield before and I know what it takes. I know what is going to go into that. It may seem that the battle is hot, but you are not out here on your own. I know it may feel like that. Each of you who are watching, somebody sitting in their own space, you may be in an inner battle in your own home. Some of you are within a fellowship and that may not be working out. Some of you, this is your first time even hearing the Bible and you're like, I don't know why I'm even listening to this. Some of you are still within your religious construct and you're not understanding why things aren't adding up and why Yah is drawing on you. But each of us are standing and we're working every day diligently to be obedient to Yah so that you have somebody, you have people, you have a nation and community that will rally around you in your time of despair, big and small, big and small. So we have sisters and brothers who are fighting on every side. So though the enemy may be around, you also are guarded and protected by the camp of Yah, the beauty of him, of each of us. Although we're spread out, we're surrounding and you're in the midst. And as we are battling, we're protecting one another. So then he says, and may Yahuwah do what is good in his sight. Joab wisely prepared for battle to the best of his ability and worked hard for the victory. He didn't go into, well, why is he not doing what he's supposed to do me doing? Or why is the king not here? Or why did he send me? Or why is he done? Why are we even fighting because he cut off somebody's? None of those were his responses. He gets in line. He arrays the men. He tells them to trust Yah. He prepares them for battle to the best of his abilities, looking at everything that's going on around. And at the same time, he knew that the outcome was ultimately in Yah's hands. All right, let's go back to the text. Let's keep reading. Let's see what happens. Verse 13. And Joab drew nigh, and the people that were with him unto the battle against the Assyrians, and they fled before him. What? How uneventful, right? Literally, he goes out to battle, and the people were with him. They draw near against the Assyrians, and they ran. When the people and then let's keep going. So Joab and when the children of Ammon saw the Syrians were fled, they fled also before Abishai and entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. So the battle's hot. The men are surrounded. They done beefed up the numbers by paying men to come out. And when the battle gets ready to be fought, they're gone. They just flee. It isn't even, it was like, okay. They fled before him. It doesn't even say that Joab engaged the army of the Syrians. This mercenary army, this army for pay, fled before the army of the mighty men because Elohim was with him. Yahuwah promised this kind of blessing upon obedient Israel. Deuteronomy 28:7. Don't worry about the army for hire. I have a huge problem at this. It's like the one little sour grape for me. Just I'm never eating any more grapes ever again. Don't be like that. See, the adversary sets up a big show before us to make us feel like, to make us lose courage and feel like we're going to be defeated. And so then we just accept the defeat. And the whole time he never had the power to do anything in the beginning. See, Joab wasn't like us. Joab wasn't going to be like, well, look, it's all these people out here. We got to go back. Let's retreat. Give up this territory we fought for. Go get the. He's like, no. You're set up. I'm going to set up. And I'm going to trust Yah that if I'm operating in his obedience, he's going to show up for me. But I'm not going to retreat. We have to stop retreating. And we have to start confronting things head on. Retreat makes the enemy feel like they've won when they haven't. And it shows a lack of trust in Yah to stand up for us in the face of our enemies. There are many people set up to fight against us, to fight against you, because of their bondage to the enemy. See, the enemy also uses people, so people can't rest. So then they bother you because they can't rest. They're going through their own turmoil, so they're constantly looking out, picking at everybody else, picking on people. You have the bully. That's sort of the bully. The bully is always the one with the most internal conflict of all the people. And he's creating, or she's creating, external conflict because he or she doesn't want to deal with their own internal conflict. See, the adversary has a bone to pick. See, Yah's mad at me, so I'm going to make sure he's mad at you too. And you have people like that where they are walking in darkness. So they want to lead you along in darkness too, or they want to cause you to stumble, and they want to come against you with accusation because they don't want to deal with themselves. Same thing happened with Saul. And that is the nature of the enemy. See, just like the Syrians too, you'll have a person with the bone to pick. Like the bully always has the flunkies, right? So the bully is like, you gonna come fight for me. I won't take your lunch money this week. And you have people all around. And so the same thing is true. Even within this nation, you have a person that says something or does something. And you have other people like, well, yeah, I'm going to go along with them because I really like them. And we're going to go out. And what ends up happening is that they try to intimidate us with numbers. Numbers don't matter to us. Numbers don't matter to Israel when we have Elohim on our side. Who cares? Who cares if there's 20 people watching and then somebody says something, only one person is watching? Who cares if that person has 80,000 people who say something negative about you and it's just you and you just don't have it? Who cares? Because when you have Yah on your side, it's greater than any amount of people. It's greater than any amount. They can look at all of us set up to fight against you because you know what, you're a bad person. And Yah's like, okay. And you didn't know that there was a whole army of people surrounding. So we see here, the numbers and the words are simply to intimidate and to show us a show of might, but we have Abba Yah to fight for us. Don't get discouraged by the paid agents who fight against our people. Because when the battle is set up and when we stand face to face before them, they flee. Because they don't have anything to stand on. The very battle was built on a misunderstanding and disrespect that followed it. And the same shame that was put before, the men that put on the men when they cut their beards and cut off their bottoms and their middle parts, the same was shown to them when they stood up. You paid all this money, you had these people come out, and then they ran when they saw that, they're really going to fight. Well, I got to go. So it says they also fled before Abishai, that's Joab's brother, and they entered into the city. So funny that people come out and they do this big show of might to fight against. And then when they can't fight, then they try to go into this walled and protected area. And then they want to yell at you from behind. Keyboard thugs and people online who, that same thing, like they went back into the city. They fled into the city. This is also very interesting because guess what's going to happen next? The king shows up. Positive and negatives in this text. And it's always like that. Hebrew deals with a lot of duality. The positive in the function of things and the negative in the dysfunction of things. See, the king wasn't out at first. And then they went into the city. Now, I want to look at this story in one other text because there's a break here. And chapter 10 is very interesting. I didn't give this at the beginning, maybe briefly, but not in its full. What's happening in chapter 10 is a prelude and the history of 11 and 12 are inserted within there, and then it kind of culminates later on. And so when the Bible translators and writers and people put together like your King James Bible from Zondervan or whatever, and they have like little headings and titles. But what we learned from First Chronicles 20 is that this is one complete it's a complete narrative. Like there's time in between here, and there's battle, and there's stuff that's happening. And so First Chronicles chapter 20 tells us the battle from beginning to the end. And so we're going to see the second part because Joab, they fled before him, they went into the city, and then Joab came to Jerusalem. There's a narrative and a story in between there, and then there is the complete subduing and the capturing of the city. I just want to show you guys that really briefly. Let's look at First Chronicles chapter 20, and then I'm going to show you the other side, the continuation of this in the text. Okay, so let's go back. First Chronicles 20. Let's go look at 19. Uh-oh, it took me all the way back. Let's fix that for you guys. First Chronicles 19. Okay, so this same exact story is told here in its completion, and it's literally identical. And so the people fled before him, and then Joab comes to Jerusalem. Okay, let's look at because I want to give you the end. Let's look at also, I think it's, and somebody can check me on it, I think it's 2 Samuel, and it's I think it's 11 or 12. I'm going to start in 11. Okay, here we go. It's at the end of chapter 12 and verse 24. Okay, I mean, chapter 12 and right on verse 26. Okay, so let's read the end of this. We're going to jump over there, and then we'll kind of see where we're going to be tomorrow, next week as well. Okay, so the people fled before them, and then Joab came to Jerusalem. Okay, so there's like some space and time in between here. And when the Syrians saw that they were smitten before Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Halam and Shobach. The captain of the host of Hadadezer went before them. So now their captain comes out, right? And when it was told David, so David's not there, he tells him, he gathered all Israel together, and they passed over Jordan and came to Halam. And the Syrians set themselves in array against David and fought with him. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men of 700 chariots of the Syrians and 40,000 horsemen, and smote Shobach, the captain of their host, who died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadadezer saw that they were smitten by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Syrians feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. I'm going to give you this, and we're going to look at that other portion. when the king shows up to battle, the slaughter was great. The simple disrespect of Ammon caused over 40,000 people to die. Our actions and the actions of the nations against us, and even our own actions that seem like simple things, can cause great despair. The nations will know that their treatment of Israel has been so erroneous when the king arrives. When the king arrives on the scene, there was no more. You had your chance to run. You had your chance to repent. You had your chance to hide. You had your chance to ask for forgiveness, but you don't. And setting up in battle against a king who has Yah on his side is never a good thing. Eventually, the men become servants of Israel. We looked at that idea of servitude last week. They become servants and they serve them, and they made peace. This idea of making peace. They didn't just say, oh, we're at peace. No, they had to make restitution for that peace, and that service was a part of that restitution for that peace. So David goes out, and we looked at how this is kind of broken up. So when the Syrians saw that they were defeated by Israel, they gathered together and they tried to fight again. And so the king is called for final reinforcement. This chapter ends with unfinished business at Rabbah, right? So the Syrians come to fight, but they haven't quite got to Rabbah, which is the city where all the people fled into after they ran off. Hadn't quite gotten there. And the enemies of Israel wouldn't quit after just one defeat. See, sometimes we go into battle and we rejoice too soon. And we think that the battle is over, and we enter into not just a praise. The praise is wonderful, but we enter into passivity, where we're like, oh, okay, this is good. We beat these enemies. Don't have anything to worry about. And the enemy is persistent and is coming back around to come back and to wreak havoc. See, we have to be more persistent than our enemy. The enemy wants you to stop. He wants you to stop. He wants you to fold. He wants you to give in. But we have to be more persistent than our enemy. See, our enemy will try another attack using our fatigue or even our triumph and our joy as a cause to cause us to stumble. Though our hands may not be fighting the physical battle, we must remember to fortify our minds against the, the encore of the enemy. When it was told David, he gathered all of Israel, and he gathered them to prevent the Syrian army. See, they had made great ground. They had caused and pushed the enemy back into their territory. And if David hadn't shown up, then the ground they gained would have been lost. He saw it. He's like, oh, okay. I know this king. I know how he fights. Here I show up. And so the result is the Syrians fled before Israel. So, as I said, the chapter ends with unfinished business at Rabbah. The offending Ammonites were still in their city, and Joab returns to Jerusalem. So they go back, but the battle's not over. In the spring, King David sent Joab and the army out again to deal with Rabbah. So we're gonna see that. And it is, I'll give you the culmination of it. So Joab fought against Rabbah and the children of Ammon, and they end up taking the royal city. And then Joab again sends messengers unto David. David again is not out on the battlefield. And he says, I have fought against Rabbah and have taken the city of waters. Now therefore gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it. And he says, lest I take the city and it be called after my name. We'll get to that. And David gathered together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. Our battles are our fights to fight. Yah was merciful to the men of Israel that went out, because they went out to battle and they were doing what was right. But David showing up at the end shows that obviously he's still in a place of obedience. But whatever was keeping him back is going to rear its head again. Whatever's happening internally. We don't know exactly what it is, but there's some internal conflict happening. And it could be he's just tired. Sometimes we get weary in the process of doing what we're supposed to do. And sometimes we get tired of fighting, but we have to push through because our people need us. See, if David had been out there, how do we know that there wouldn't have been the Syrians coming out to rearray an army? If David would have stayed, how do we know that they wouldn't have continued into the cities of Ammon? He stops short of going into the cities of Ammon and suspends the battle. And sometimes we stop short of ultimate victory because of something internally stirring. And it's not here, so maybe it's something that we can't even voice. David also writes later about his own internal battles and the things that, there are things that are on paper that people know about us. Like people know David's transgression and sins, but then we're also battling with the things that people don't know, or how those things are also affecting us. And that shows that our internal problems and traumas and triggers have to be dealt with before every battle. We have to deal with them. And sometimes it takes time to sit back and deal with those things. Just like Israel needed the king, who is David, for reinforcement, we need Yah. See, we can push through small battles, or we can even push through great battles with one another. But the ultimate victory comes when the king arrives. And that's what we're waiting for. I know a lot of us have gotten weary just in our short amount of time in life, looking at how our nation has been treated, looking at how we've been disenfranchised, looking at how the other nations view us, how they look down on the Blacks, how even within our own communities, we do the things we do. And we are in this position where we're fighting. And victory is just shortly over the edge. And then we just go home. We don't push forward and completely stop the wound. We put a Band-Aid and hold off for a later time, allowing the enemy to grow stronger, when really we have to keep battling, keep on the forefront, keep being restored. Because if Yah restored us in the past battle, then he'll restore us in this one as well. If he has strengthened us as we've fought up until this point, why would he leave us right before and right at the door of our victory? And so the king showing up adds hope to the people, and you see them go out and the battle is fought. David was supposed to be out to battle because he was the representation of Yah being with them. He's the one that is leading them. He's praying, and he's supposed to go before the people. And so Joab's of hope were not surety. We're not, he was sure, but they were further solidified when the king came and fought with them in battle. Our nation depends on our leadership to show up. Our nation depends on a praying and present leadership. We can't be in our own heads and in our own minds and our own battles and then forsake the people who are out on the battlefield waiting for, and I'm talking now as a teacher, and I'm speaking for those who preach and the men who stand before our nation and proclaim the word. I'm speaking to that as well. Our people need that, because it is that is the encouragement to the people on the battlefield. Let's look it up. Deuteronomy chapter 20. It says, when thou goest out to battle against thine enemies and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, Be not afraid of them, for Yahuwah Elohim is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be when you're coming nigh unto battle that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint. Fear not, and do not tremble, neither be terrified because of them, for Yahuwah your Elohim is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. That is our encouragement. That is it. While there may be shame and an enemy that seeks to rise up against the nation, there is the encouragement given by our leaders and our teachers who are praying and standing with all of us in battle and knowing that Yah is with us, that he shows up. When David wasn't there, Yah still showed up. And we have to make sure that we're in the right place at the right time for Yah's people. In the next chapter, we're going to see David not go out to battle again. The first time David doesn't go out to battle, Yah fights the battle as he always had, and he works greatly for the people of Israel. And whatever David is going through, David has to go through. But it was a warning. You need to be out there with your people. This is the way I've set it up. The encouragement, the Melech walks in the midst of the people. It's necessary not only for the people, but it's necessary for you to serve in the capacity that you were chosen to serve. Last time you didn't go out, the battle lasted longer than it should have. This next time that you don't go out, it could be even worse. Join us next week as we look at David and him once again sending out and not going, and the trouble and the dividing of the kingdom that comes in the process. Until then, Shabbat Shalom. I hope this encouraged you. I hope that each of you have a wonderful rest of your week. Shavua Tov to everyone. And if you want to join us and see more of what we do throughout the week, join us on Patreon. We're over there. There's messages, there's encouragement. We're currently in the process of our Hebrew studies, so courses are closed, but there will be announcements on when those will open up in the future. Check the description below for events that are happening, for the information on the mosaic that's behind me, and for how to connect with us throughout the week. Until then.